The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. What can the Minnesota Vikings earn for them? And why is it not a linear process? This isn't an IKEA instruction booklet. There is no one singular blueprint. But the Vikings can certainly learn a thing or two. Welcome to the Real Forness Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forness Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forness Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he is producer Dave. Dave, Super Bowl was last night. I was not looking forward to the game like I have been in most years, but let me tell you, I enjoyed the game way more than I expected.
Why is that?
It wasn't a traditionally good game, like we've seen in past years, where like all the Chiefs Super Bowl wins, I believe, were like the last two were by 3 points. The last three Super Bowls were decided by 3 points. The Chiefs' first Super Bowl, they were inches away from losing it. But all Jimmy Garoppolo needs to do is be about 1 yard closer to Emmanuel Sanders, and that's a touchdown. But it was a good game in the sense that we got a phenomenal performance from the Philadelphia Eagles. And they came to play, they whipped ass, and they took names. It was really that simple. And I thought it was really cool to see that element come into play. It was really cool to see a team just kind of take over. And I'm one of those people that I really enjoyed watching the Patriots all those years. I've always been a humongous fan of Tom Brady. I think where the Chiefs are right now, I just don't enjoy watching them. I don't have fun. It's not an enjoyable brand of football for me. And I think that's just going to be in the eye of the beholder. It's not that they're not good, but there are obvious flaws, and then got exploited in a major way on Sunday night. And those flaws could end up costing the Vikings, because I think there's a bigger chance Trey Smith stays in Kansas City now than we would have said on Friday or Saturday before the game. Now the Chiefs have their own problems. They have only $11 million in cap space, 38 guys under contract, but they have some things they can do. They can always push money, Patrick Mahomes, out forward like they've already done a bunch of times. Travis Kelce can save them $15 million if he chooses to retire, which then that causes its own level of problems. But it's almost like they need to revamp what they're doing. They need to almost like start a mini rebuild, kind of like the Buffalo Bills did this year. And the Bills were this close to making the Super Bowl. But because they kind of did that mini rebuild where they just needed to reset some positions and then try to build it back up, they're in a way better position now moving forward than they were previously. And I think those things matter, Dave. I think they matter quite a bit. I'm not sold that the what do you call it? The Kansas City Chiefs are going to be this great team long term. I'm sold that Patrick Mahomes is great. Andy Reid's getting up there. Steve Spagnuolo wants another head coaching opportunity. But they have some things that they need to accomplish. And now
you don't think they're going to be a decade-long dynasty, in other words?
Yeah, I think they're going to run into the similar problems that the Patriots had in that huge gap between Brady's third and fourth Super Bowl wins, because it was a decade. They're going to run into that buzzsaw. And I'm not going to say that they're going to have that long of a drought, but I think they're going to have some struggles. And one of the reasons why is you can't keep hitting on draft picks at the historic rate that they were hitting. It's just unsustainable. And when you have that kind of draft pick success, well, then you have to pay them. Trey Smith, 6th round pick, you're going to have to pay market value. Creed Humphrey, 2nd round pick, both 2021. Now you already paid him market value. Nick Bolton, also a 2nd round pick. He's set to be a free agent. You're going to have to pay him market value. Trent McDuffie just finished his third year. He's an all-pro corner. You're going to have to pay him market value. There are elements to this, and we're not going to talk a whole lot about the Chiefs. This is not a Chiefs podcast, but it's a factor. They're not going to be able to sustain this, or maybe they will because they're the Kansas City Chiefs. But what I do find interesting is taking a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, Dave. The Eagles and how they've built this team. I wrote a long form piece at A to Z Sports about it. And I find it, Dave, very interesting. Odie is chewing on something. I need to make sure he's not dying, but I find it interesting. What do you think?
Well, I asked everybody before the show. You took lessons from this game. I took lessons from this game. Are we going to agree or not? And what are the viewers' lessons from this game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, I'm glad I did. He had this little piece of Velcro in his mouth. So, of course, he's an Odie. This is what Odies do. They put things in their mouth. What a goober. What a goober, Odie. And he's laying down like, oh, but I didn't do it, Dad. I promise. Well, yeah, you did. But enough about my French bulldog. So I wanted to talk about this because let's just be real. Everybody talks about it the day after, but it's the why behind talking about it and trying to contextualize what it means. Because, like I said in the intro, it is not a set of IKEA instructions. I put together this really nice behind the couch, like bar top table that now you can have people sitting on the couch. You can have people sitting at this table and watching the game. It kind of kicks ass. It's awesome. But one of the big things there is you have this instruction booklet on how to build it, how to put it together. There is no instruction booklet on how to put together a Super Bowl champion. You look back at the last 10, 12, 14 Super Bowl champions, basically since like 2010. There really is no true blueprint except one. They all have a franchise quarterback, and they all are good in the trenches. Outside of that, it's not a linear process. It is not, you do this, you will win a Super Bowl. You still have to play. You still have to get your coaching to show up. You still have to get your players to play in the big spots. It's not as simple as, hey, boom, you do this. Guess what? You're going to win a Super Bowl. And I think that's a really important factor in having this conversation. The Eagles are a very unique team. Howie Roseman, I think, gets praised way too much for what he does. I also think he's great at what he does because it's just like, oh my gosh, Howie did it again. He traded a third-round pick for a wide receiver that barely played all year, but he almost caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So Howie did it again. No, you didn't have to give up a third-round pick for that guy. You could have just found him on the free agent market and gotten the same kind of results. Like, I think Howie is a little overrated in that sense because it's almost like every move he makes is gospel, but he does a really, really good job. And I think some of his processes, which, let's be honest, I'm surprised Kwesi Ofemeta hasn't picked up on some of those, because while he never worked directly under Howie Roseman, he worked directly under Howie Roseman's right-hand man for a long time, Andrew Berry, who took a lot of those things with him to Cleveland. And I believe some of the things that they're doing are translatable, and some are not, because there is no one singular process to build a title. But history shows you need to have a franchise quarterback or a historically great defense. 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2000 Baltimore Ravens, 1990 New York Giants. None of them had franchise quarterbacks. Well, the Giants did, but Phil Simms was hurt. He didn't play. So Jeff Hostetler was the guy. But they had historically great defenses. Bill Belichick called that 90 Giants team. Bill Belichick's defense stopped the Bills. And then 2000, Marvin Lewis and that famous Ravens defense with Ray Lewis. I don't believe Ed Reed was on that team yet, but you had Jamie Sharper, Tony Siragusa, Sam Adams. They had some dudes on that roster. And then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2002. the Tampa 2, Warren Sapp, Simeon Rice, John Lynch, Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber. There's 4 Hall of Famers on that defense. Like, you have to be special if you're going to win without a franchise quarterback. That's what history has told us. So if JJ McCarthy is a franchise quarterback, or if Sam Darnold is the franchise quarterback, you got to be right, whoever that quarterback is. And then you have to be right with the trenches. And I think that's the biggest point. But I think people are going to miss the forest for the trees. Oh, you need to invest a lot in the trenches. It's not about investing in the trenches as much. It's about making the right investments. It's about being smart with your investments. And I think that is where the Eagles have done a phenomenal job. They're not just investing to invest in the trenches. They're investing at the right times with the right players, and they're doing so without being forced to. They weren't forced to draft Cam Jurgens to be their future center, but they knew Jason Kelce was getting up there, and he started at guard in year 2, and then he was the center this year. They drafted him in the 2nd round in 2022, preparing for the day Jason Kelce decided to call it quits. That kind of foresight matters. Landon Dickerson, he was a guy that fell. People thought he would go in the 1st round. He went in the 2nd. Why? He's a 6'6", like 330-pound guard that had injury issues in college. Well, he's now the highest paid guard in the National Football League. Jalen Carter. The only reason why Jalen Carter was available at 9th overall was because he was a bozo off the field. You remember at the Combine in 2023, about 15 minutes before he was supposed to speak at the podium and do interviews, it came out that he was involved in like a car racing incident where somebody died. I think it was one of his teammates. That, like, reasons like that were why he fell to 9th overall, not because he was great, but they take advantage of those opportunities. And they got Nolan Smith at 30th overall, who I liked quite a bit coming out. But everybody just made fun of. Friend of the show, Arif Hassan, even tweeted during the preseason, why is he playing meaningful snaps in the 3rd preseason game? Well, he ended up being a major factor in why they won on Sunday. They make the right picks at the right times with the right players. And that is a huge factor in their success. But they're also drafting for the future. They're drafting talented players. Don't draft for need, draft talent. They continue to draft in the trenches because that's where most football games are won. And then when they have a big need like they did last year, they hit 2 home runs with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean at cornerback. They fixed their cornerback room with 2 draft picks. It's incredible how they've kind of fortified that roster, how they've identified talent and gone out and acquired it. But it's not as simple as you can just do it. You have to have the systems in place. You have to have the right people you can trust. Throw out 2022. 2022 is always going to be an anomaly draft because of the process that went into it for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. He shouldn't be absolved of any blame, but that blame deserves a level of context that people are not willing to give him because he did not have his scouts. He did not have his processes in place. He was listening to people that he didn't necessarily trust nearly as much because that's the nature of the game when you take over in January. You can't flip the whole process because they've already spent a year and a half on these guys. You kind of have to ride it out. And I think you can see from how Adolfo-Mensah has really prioritized things over the course of the next 2 drafts that he learned a lot from that first draft and he did not make the same mistakes. His first draft pick after 2022 was a slam dunk home run, Jordan Addison. Kai Blackman looked like he was a home run before he tore his ACL, and he still might be a home run. JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner, if those 2 picks hit, massive home runs. Kyrie Jackson could have been a home run too, but unfortunately, because of the tragedy, we'll never know. But I do think his pick is going to give us a little bit of a view into how the Vikings might view cornerback, and we'll get to that at a later date. Because I think that's the prototype they want. That's a theory. I don't know 100% for sure, but it's a theory. The reality is this. You have to be able to trust the people you have in the building, which obviously Kwesi does now. They are leaning into it. They are leaning into utilizing their own process, which I think is working. It's certainly working in free agency. Free agency, who is better than the Vikings in free agency this year? Nobody. They got 3 Pro Bowl, 4, sorry. No, was it 3 or 4 Pro Bowlers? It was 3. It should have been 4. Jonathan Goddard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Sam Darnold. All Pro Bowlers. All free agent signings. We can make fun of the Pro Bowl and how it doesn't mean anything. It does and it doesn't. The actual game itself doesn't mean anything, but being elected to go means something. It will always mean something. The fact that the Vikings are that good in free agency, now you can use that to start translating into the draft. It's easier to view somebody to sign in free agency because you're viewing it through the lens of they're already playing in the National Football League. It's always going to be easier. But I think
they've already gone through their development phase.
Yeah.
The transition.
And I think as a general whole, Kwesi Mensah has been been treated a little bit unfairly with the draft stuff because of the circumstances surrounding it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get any criticism for it because they didn't work. But I think the fact that he made so many adjustments to fix what happened in that draft, I think we can kind of like just view it as a wash. It sucks, but it is what it is. So the way that the Eagles have drafted, just listen to the players that they've drafted in the trenches in the last 4 drafts in the first 3 rounds. 2021, Landon Dickerson in the 2nd round, Milton Williams the 3rd round. Dickerson's the highest paid player at his position already. Milton Williams is going to get paid in free agency. 2022, Jordan Davis 1st round, starting nose tackle. Cam Jurgens 2nd round, starting center. 2023, Jalen Carter 1st round, starting defensive tackle. Edge rusher Nolan Smith. I don't believe he's a starter, or if he is, like he's high in the rotation. So he's an impactful player. And offensive lineman Tyler Steen in the 3rd round, who has gotten some spot starts and has played well when called upon. And this year, Jalix Hunt, 3rd round, edge rusher, got a sack in the Super Bowl. That dude was a safety 3 years ago in college at the FCS level. You have to not just invest, but you have to be smart about your investments. And there's this party line where the Vikings don't invest in offensive line, and that's just not true. Their investments haven't hit as much as you wanted them to. But they spent a 1st rounder on Darisaw, massive hit. They spent a 2nd rounder on Brian O'Neill in 2018, massive hit. They spent a 1st round on Garrett Bradbury, and I'm going to call it like a half hit because he's been a capable enough starter, but he's not what you drafted him to be. Ed Ingram, your mileage is going to vary on how you view that pick, but he's probably not starting next year. So how you judge that as a hit is going to be interesting to quantify too. Like I view Caleb Evans as a draft hit. You got starting level play for 16 games out of a 4th round pick. That's a hit. Now it's not a long-term hit, but that's where context matters. You got 2.5 years of starting out of Ed Ingram with some good play, some really good play, some disaster play. So how you judge that is up to you. It's like a half hit. I'm less irritated about how he loses than other people are, which I understand. That's a style preference thing, and we've talked about it on the show. But it's not like the Vikings haven't tried. They've also gone out and signed some free agents, some lower tier, some higher tier. 2017, they signed Riley Reif and Mike Remmers to completely fix their offensive tackle spots. It worked to an extent, but it wasn't a long-term solution. Now, the big thing that I take away from it is they are drafting good players in the trenches consistently so they don't have these glaring holes. They have glaring holes on their team, but they make sure that it's not in the trenches. And I think that's a really big factor here, Dave. The trenches are something that they have continuously tried to fortify and continuously tried to make sure that they address every single year. And it's worked. Now they're going to have to find a way to pay all these guys, but that's a problem for tomorrow. For today, I got a Super Bowl. I don't care. And the Vikings should kind of look at it and be like, we need to be smart about how we attack. We need to not worry so much about what's a need. Just take good football players. Take good football players that you know will be good football players down the line. And you're never going to be the Eagles, which is why I say one of the big things here is that you can't just completely copy everything that the Eagles do. Main reason, you don't have their offensive line coach. Jeff Stoutland is arguably the greatest offensive line coach in the history of football. That's a huge factor in the Eagles' success. Now, I have nothing against Chris Cooper. I think he's a solid O-line coach. I think he's done a good job with this group. You look at a lot of the metrics, whether how much you put stock into them or not, they're top half of the league offensive line. Before Darrisaw was hurt, they were a great offensive line. And I think that Darrisaw injury factored in way more than a lot of people were willing to let on. But you don't have Jeff Stoutland. You don't have the elite offensive line coach. You have a very good one, or a good one, or an average one. However you want to quantify Chris Cooper. It's hard to know how much impact Chris Cooper is having when you're not in the building working side by side with him. So I'm going to say he's an average to above average offensive line coach. But if you really want to take that next step, you got to find a way to get that guy to be great. You got to get a great O-line coach. You got to have great assistants who elevate these guys. You got to have a bunch of Grant Udinskis where everybody wants to raid your staff every single year. You got to have that. And right now, the Vikings don't. And I think that's a big factor in why they weren't able to really take that leap. Injuries, of course, played a factor in that. And 2024 was never supposed to be the year. But when you look at the Eagles, it's too simple to be like, oh, hey, boom. You have a great offensive line. Well, why? Jeff Stoutland begged them to take Jordan Mailata in the 7th round. He's now a top 3 left tackle in football. He was a rugby player in Australia. You're not going to find that on the open market. You are not finding that kind of coach. So you can't just have the Eagles. You can't just do what the Eagles do. But you can take things from what they do and implement them into your own system to try and elevate this team to a Super Bowl level. Any thoughts, Dave?
Well, I'm having a great O-line coach helps tremendously. It is a multiplier on how well a team can perform, both in the run game and in the pass game. And the Eagles obviously proved that this year. Now, I would like to know if Stoutland is also the run game coordinator. Does he help plan that? Where I don't think Cooper has anything to do with planning the run game. I think that's still all on KOC or Wes Phillips or whomever. But we've invested people. The people haven't turned out. The question is, did the people have the talent and ability to do such? I would say yes. Did the coach not get the most out of them? You said Jeff Stoutland went for the rugby player out of Australia. Well, he obviously saw the physical traits and talent that he wanted to mold into an offensive tackle. Did he do it? Yes, he did. That is coaching. I have a feeling, and I know this is a case across the NFL, some coaches are there just to run a system. All right, guys, here we're going to run this play. I'm going to teach you this play. we're going to run this system, and you've got to perform or you get fired type of deal. And that's it. They're not the ones that are going, hey, I want this guy. I'm going to develop him how to use him to the best of his ability and then work that into my system or modifying the system to work. And I think that's where, from what I can see from the outside, Cooper fails, because I don't see that. We've invested first and second rounders in that offensive line and still got squat. And I shouldn't say squat, both tackles. We got the bookend tackles. That's not a problem. It's the interior that's the problem. And that should be fixed. And why it isn't comes to me because you got guys that were talented. Even Garrett Bradbury was the Outland Trophy winner coming out of college. Best center. Well, that usually translates to a good transition into the NFL. And we know his transition was miserable. It was horrible. He didn't get anywhere until the 4th or 5th year. And now it is still just mediocre. And that... So, the Eagles have found a way to fix it. Obviously, they bring in good coaching. Good coaching is a huge part of it. Now, does KOC need to evaluate his coaches and make a decision? When should he do that? Should he do it at the end of the season so he can say, you're fired, go find a job someplace else? Or does he do it in the offseason? Or does he do it in the offseason and say, hey, Chris Cooper, come here. I need you to do this, this, and this. Find out how Jeff Stoutland does it over here. Incorporate that. What is he doing? How is he developing players? I want you to incorporate more of that into your game. Come back with me. Come back with a plan for me in a week. I want to review it. Let's see. And if that's the way that goes about and it works, great. If it doesn't, then KOC can say, hey, next year, sorry, we appreciate your time here. It's been good. I'm looking for a better O-line coach. And go from there. But you can't keep saying, it's good enough. No, it's not good enough because we're not winning Super Bowls. We're not even getting there. Or getting to the playoffs, finally. Yes, playoffs. But we're not winning Super Bowls. We're not winning playoff games. That still needs to be done. So, does it take a good interior O-line? Yes. Now, did the Eagles O-line have some issues last night? Yes, they did. But they were a lot better at it than the Chiefs O-line was, including Trey Smith, who is rumored that the Vikings are going after, and I've pounded the table for, but now I'm changing my mind on that. You've got to be able to build an offensive line that can take on a defensive line that can push and rush with just 4 people and get to the quarterback and make his life miserable. Otherwise, you may make it to the Super Bowl, but if you're going against a team that can push with 4 and disrupt the quarterback, how are you going to win? Eagles had good wide receivers. Chiefs had good wide receivers for the most part, ish.
Well, that one's debatable.
But how are you going to win? If the quarterback gets pushed off and is uncomfortable and doesn't have time and gets sacked a half dozen times.
Yeah. So to answer your question earlier, Jeff Stoutland is the run game coordinator, and the assistant O-line coach, TJ Paganetti, is the run game specialist. So they have a lot of investment in the run game.
And they had a great running back that surpassed 2,000 yards this year.
Yeah. It helps when you have an elite level running back, let me tell you. That
goes on the line coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah. He didn't do it in New York.
No. Like, situation matters. And I think one of the reasons why the run game hasn't been as successful as it is the O-line could definitely be better in run blocking. I think, two, Kevin O'Connell just does not trust his running backs. He trusted them more this year.
Yeah, but is it because of the O-line not performing and opening the holes like they like? Or the running backs not being capable? I'd say it's a bit of both. But especially if the O-line's rocking and opening holes, then it's all the running back.
I think it's a combination. I think it's more the running back themselves, especially before this year, because those guys, when the holes were open, they weren't taking them. I also think
they weren't seeing them, or they were slow moving through it.
Kevin O'Connell has this thing where
Madison.
It's kind of like Andy Reid when Andy Reid took over the Eagles job, where he just wants to throw the ball. He always wants to throw the ball. And I think to an extent, he's a part of the problem. I think Kevin O'Connell's a great play caller. He understands situational football well. He understands how to attack, where to attack, and what to attack with. But he gets into his own head and sometimes chases shot plays a little too much and wants to really attack vertically when he doesn't have to. And I think that matters. I think that's a big factor here. Let's kind of move on to some of the other points that I had, because it's not just about coaching. Finding value. I think the Vikings actually do a pretty good job of this. Finding value is an important factor. You have to be able to find value. Like the Eagles found it with Jordan Mailata. You can't expect to find a franchise left tackle in round 7. But they found Zach Bond, who was an all-pro, and they paid him like $2 million. You have to be able to find really good players at value, and I think the Vikings have done that. Andrew Van Ginkel, starting Pro Bowler, $10 million a year. Blake Cashman, I thought should have been a Pro Bowler, but because of how they deal with linebackers, nope. He did not make the Pro Bowl. So I think it's a very interesting aspect here. I think it's a fascinating discussion where I think the Vikings do a really good job of finding value where they need to. But at the same time, you have to be able to combine it with hitting on your big names. They did with Jonathan Grenard. They've hit with Justin Jefferson. They've hit with Christian Darrisaw. But have you hit with Dallas Turner and J.J. McCarthy? You don't know yet. They've hit with Jordan Addison, which is great. But you have to continue hitting your big spots while finding value in other places. And I think when those two get officially married together, that's when you're going to see a lot of growth. That's where you're going to see a lot of positivity. And I think that's going to be a huge factor in figuring this out and really taking that elevated step.
But we don't want it in 2028. We want it now.
Of course we want it now. Everybody wants it now. Everybody wants it now.
That's what she said.
Yeah, it's just an interesting one, Dave, because you want this instant gratification. You want it. But you can't always have it that way. You can't always have it that way. And I think the Vikings are going to be in a position where we have to be a little bit more patient. It's frustrating. Dave, you're older than me. You've seen Vikings play in Super Bowls. I've never seen them play in the Super Bowl. I'm 35 years old. I would like to see them play in and win a Super Bowl. But they got their salary cap completely reset. They got a really good core nucleus, and now they need to fortify the rest of the roster and continue to build the youth of the team, which, quite frankly, they don't have as much as you'd like them to. But some of their age factors were like Harrison Smith, Stephon Gilmore, like stopgap kind of guys are not the future, but they're here and they're playing well.
To fill it. With the loss
Andrew
of
Powell is going to be 38. He's your long snapper. Who cares?
Mhm.
That one does not matter. It's interesting to kind of look at the whole scope of this, because you have to not just find value, you have to be able to win. You have to be able to win your the games you're supposed to. You have to be able to hit when it's easiest to hit. And I think the Vikings have started to do that. I think Dallas Turner looked really good at the end of the season. I think JJ McCarthy has a potential to be a franchise quarterback. Not a guarantee, but he has the potential to be one for sure. Jordan Addison, great season in his second year after a great season in his first year. Like, things are turning around from a draft perspective. And I think that's a good thing. Now, it'd be nice if Andrew Booth and Lewis Cine both hit. Be real nice. But it's just not the reality. And you know what? If Kwesi Adofo-Mensah hits on both Turner and McCarthy, he will have hit on 3 of his 4 first-round picks. That's a great hit rate. But that you got to find a way to sustain. You got to find a way to keep to draft well on day 2 and 3. Quite frankly, they haven't had a lot of day 2 picks because they use some to get TJ Hawkinson. They use some to move up the board. So they need to find a way to maximize day 2 a little more. They're going to have one day 2 pick, maybe more, depending on how trades go on draft night, because they're going to get that 3rd round pick from the Kirk Cousins trade. And that's going to be great. It's going to be a nice asset to continue building up this franchise, which I would not be surprised if the Vikings trade back and get like 2 fourths or something to get another bite at the apple, because 97th overall pick versus like 112 and 130, there's really not a whole lot of difference there. Last thing is it's not just about the pass rush. It's not just about getting interior defensive linemen. We need more pass rush from the interior of the defensive line. There's no doubt about it. But you can't sacrifice the run game to get it. You can't just bring in a guy who's only a pass rush specialist and expect him to pay him a ton of money and expect him to play a bunch. You have to stop the run. The Vikings are great at stopping the run. They were 2nd in the National Football League at stopping the run. Jonathan Bullard should be an instant re-sign. Jerry Tillery, I'm good without him. But you can't just draft a guy because he can rush the passer. You can't. You can't.
What if you take somebody like, Williams from the Eagles?
He's not a run guy. Sacks. There's a reason why
I agree. He's not a typical run guy. Now, he's had some good run grades over his earlier seasons. Why it wasn't this year, I don't know. But as a pass rush guy, if you have him in the rotation, bring him in, on obvious passing downs, you're taking pressure off the blitzing, which leaves somebody else back in the backfield. See, the problem with blitzing, you want to have, no matter if you're blitzing or not, you want 4 guys that can be able to rush the quarterback. And if 4 guys can do it, and a 5th guy helps, great, blitz. But every 5th, 6th, 7th guy you take is taking somebody off the back end. Now, if you don't have anybody that can get pressure rushing or blitzing that much, or you're taking so much off the back end that if it gets beat, i.e. like by Detroit or by the Rams did to us, then you're hurting. Well, if you could stick somebody like Williams in there on 3rd down and get pass rush pressure there, then you can have Cashman or whomever it is stay back in coverage, and maybe they don't get the quick passes that get caught and go 4 yards, for a first down or whatever, and get beat because he's in there to step in front of the pass, deflect the pass, defeat the pass, whatever. Because you have another guy that's in the rotation that works great. Now, Jonathan Bullard, I think is great against the run. I want him in the rotation no matter what. But it would be nice to have a guy that's, we're an obvious passing down. We're going to stick him in and see how it goes. And if we can get more pressure that way, because it's passing and not rushing, it doesn't matter at that point, then let's do that. That's my argument for that.
And you know what? I think you should have one of those guys, but you also have to be able to generate some semblance of a pass rush on rush downs. And to me, you can't have a Milton Williams on there as a 3-down player. You just can't. He's not a run defender. He's not a guy you can trust in those spots. And when you look at some of those run defense grades, which contextually, he's doing it on like 3rd down, like on pass rushing downs. That's where the disconnect is. Jalen Carter is so good because he's a great run defender. He's a great run defender, and he's able to rush the passer and be a humongous disruptor. That's why he's so good. You have to be able to find that, but it's hard to find those guys. Those guys get signed when you find them. That's why it was supposed to be a great defensive line class. Well, guess what? It's not, because all those guys got signed. Now, could you maybe strike a trade and see if the Titans might be willing to move Jeffrey Simmons now? Yeah. I think it's very possible. I do. But you have to find a way to not let your run defense suffer while trying to improve the pass. And that's the difficult thing. That's where if you bring in Milton Williams, how much do you have to pay that guy to get in the building? Is it $20 million? You can't give that guy $20 million.
I doubt it. He's forecasted for that much.
Well, I don't know what he's forecasted, but some people that I respect be like, yeah, you got to probably start with like the Jonathan Allen contract because of how well he played. And it's free agency. Guys get overpaid because that's what you have to do to get them into your building. So
in the first round of the free agency.
Yeah. And he's going to be one of those guys. How much are you paying him? If you give him $20 million, it's a mistake. And that's part of the problem. You can't give that guy $20 million. So now
I was thinking more like 12.
You're in between a rock and a hard place. I love Oso Odighizuwa. I think he's going to cost $13 to $15 million a year. And he's a better run defender than a guy like Milton Williams. I like Oso a lot. I think you can plug him in Jerry Tillery's role as like a 4-eye-5 technique and then kick him inside on pass rush downs. And I think he can play a more expanded role. But you have to be careful because interior pass rush is great, but you just can't be a detriment there. I think the biggest reason why the Vikings struggled at the end of the year, they're not trusting their guys to just win one-on-one. They're doing all these exotic stunts and pressures and blitzes, and they're trying to be too creative. Let Jonathan Gennard just whip a tackle's butt. Let Andrew Van Ginkel just put a move on the right tackle. You have to trust your guys to win one-on-one. You have to trust them that they're going to be able to get the job done. Yeah, that doesn't mean you abandon your blitzes. It doesn't mean you abandon your exotic pressures and your stunts. But you have to trust your guys to win. I don't think Brian Flores at the end of the year trusted his guys enough to just win. There's always an idea behind it, always a scheme where we're going to run this exotic blitz. We're going to run this stunt. And we're going to have Andrew Van Ginkel loop over 3 gaps to be able to get pressure. Well, guess what? Matt Stafford's throwing the ball in 2 seconds. By the time Van Ginkel hits the B gap, guess what? The ball's already out of the hand, so it doesn't even matter. Those things, I think, are bigger factors right now than just needing to improve that defensive line. Let your dudes win. Also with that, I don't think edge rushers out of play in the first round. They have 2 edge rushers after this year, Dallas Turner and Jonathan Gennard. Van Ginkel's a free agent. Pat Jones is a free agent. Jihad Ward is a free agent. Edge rusher is not an absurd pick for this Minnesota Vikings team.
Pat Jones is a free agent this year.
Yeah.
Van Ginkel is next year.
Yep.
We got 3 right now.
Yeah.
Basically, top line.
You have Dallas Turner and Jonathan Gennard signed past 2025.
Right.
The Vikings have a ton of flexibility, but it also means that you can still invest in the position, especially with how Flores likes to use multiple edge rushers. I think if there's a right edge at 24, it's a real possibility. It is a non-zero chance. And I think we need to open ourselves up to that. I'll answer this from cause and effect, and I think we are going to get out of here. Yes, Forno, do you think this is why paying attention to undrafted guys is just as important as looking at guys in the draft? And is this where we need to find more value in your scouts? I think you need to find value where you can get it. And Kwesi Mensa found value in Josh Oliver by signing him instead of a wide receiver 3. And I think that was a really good signing. Guys like Ivan Pace, you can find. We can't expect to find starters every year in undrafted free agency, but good role players, good special teamers, guys you think you can develop into maybe be like real contributors. It's a very important factor, because one thing a lot of people don't understand is once like day 3 starts, some guys will just ask to go undrafted so they can pick their spot, because it'll be easier for them to make a team if they get into the right situation. Priest Holmes did that. Once day 3 started, he's like, tell everybody not to draft me. I want to go undrafted. I want to pick my home. And he picked Baltimore, and he was good in Baltimore. Then he signed a 5-year, $8 million contract in Kansas City and had like offensive player of the year caliber seasons. Like, those things happen. So I don't know if it's 100% the fact of, hey, Andrew, Ivan Pace asked to go undrafted. I don't know if his agent did that. Some guys do. And then they get to pick their situation. Guess what? Ivan Pace picked a great one, because now he's a starting player on a really good defense. You need to find value where you can find it. And if you can find value in undrafted free agency with good football players, you're going to give yourself an edge over other people. But those edges can win you a Super Bowl, but you still need to have the top line guys. The back end of your roster wins Super Bowls, but you still need the top end talent to get there, because you need guys to step up, make plays, and not make mistakes. Mistakes lose Super Bowls more than big plays win them. You need to find edges where you can get them. And I think the Vikings have done a really good job of finding edges where they can. And they need to continue growing that element of their game, of their process. But yeah, that's the show tonight. A lot of really interesting stuff that we can gather from the Super Bowl. A lot of really fascinating bullet points that we can expect the Vikings to be able to utilize, and some that they can't, because they're never going to have Jeff Stoutland. And I think it's interesting to kind of look at it from a big picture perspective and try to understand what the Vikings are going to be able to do, what they're doing from every level. And let's just be real. Vikings are a good football team, and they need to find a way to be great. And looking at great teams can help you find those edges to get you over the top. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Tomorrow, I believe we're going to have a Scolders and Spice. Correct, Dave?
As if all goes well, yes.
Wednesday, Real Forno Show will be back. And don't forget, until further notice, 2-0 Bloggers is now on Sundays. This is where subscribing and turning on that little bell to get those notifications is going to come in handy, because there's going to be a lot more stuff. Draft season is officially here for everyone, and we're going to start doing some more draft content, which means some random times.
Hey, we're less than a month away from legal tampering.
Damn right.
Illegal tampering's already started, but that's
It started at the Senior Bowl.
That's
and it'll ramp up at the combine, but we're going to have a lot of great stuff for you. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!